This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to this edition of Trades Exchange. As always, everything that we're going to be talking about today is for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended as any type of investment advice. So we have a couple questions here. It's just, I know I say this all the time, but you guys, you need to start coming up with your questions. Okay, you should have a set time each week where you think about your trading. You go over your journals and you see where you're lacking or where you can use more work. And from there, it doesn't have to be specific. If you notice, some of the best questions are pretty much just about a topic. And then we kind of go from there. So it's so imperative to use this time to really get to where you want to be quicker, because the more that you really focus on your questions, the more you're going to have to focus on your trading, and it's a huge tool. So make sure that you're using it. All right, so let's start with our first question. How can we reshape our thought process while trading to stick to our calculated plan? How can the plan change according to the prints, and how do you know when the change is changed the initial plan? Answer: click the button every time we see a trade after we have created the plan and let it work to our price target or stop. When prints above print personality come in, ask how it affects the current game plan. And that definitely has a lot to do with it. So I mean, it's definitely a good answer, but really the thought process, the more that we do our calculations and the quicker that we are able to actually calculate a trade from what we see going on out there, you're going to start to see that the more and the easier it is to actually allow it to be able to work itself out. For instance, FuelCell is a great example today, because we come in at that 7 level. We got a couple bids and then a couple asks with the huge bids afterwards. Now, I know that we don't talk about this a lot, but remember, there's a number. Technically, we have our 1 through 4s, okay, but there is a number 5 and a number 6. A number 5 is going to be bid prints, okay, followed by ask prints. What happens is it goes up real quick, and then we can expect it to come back down. Okay, a number 6 is we get a bunch of bid prints followed by ask prints, so we could expect it to go down quick and then end up coming back up towards those ask prints. So basically what happened is that we just kept pushing past that 7. All right, so we got the huge a couple bid prints followed by the huge ask prints, and we just continued on our way up. Then we came to 750. Now, why is 750 such a great spot? We see this setup day in and day out, at least a couple times. Each day you're going to be able to make a trade. It's a psych level. Okay, when something gets too far away from what needs to happen, all right, it once it gets to a psych level, it's one of the best spots for them to come in and give a reality check. Now, why is that? Why did they push it over 750, that psych level, and then just to bring it back down? What's the psychology behind it? Who likes 750? Retail, exactly. Why do they like 750? Well, because it's a major, psychological level. Okay, in their eyes, it's a support line. So once it breaks up above, it's very easy for them to get people to come in, get that interest level. Okay, they have that support right underneath, and then we end up bringing it right back down. So we got a beautiful trigger. Now, where did we need to go here? Okay, we're going to get back to game plan in a second. Where do we technically need to go from what we saw? What's the number that we would be able to set our price target once the stock is coming back to reality? Yes, overall. Okay, well, think about it. So at least now I'm talking about our pullback. Okay, because this technically was a pullback trade because it just had a ton of buying. So where do we technically need to go? Okay, if 7 is where we pull back, where's the actual number? Okay, well, technically it's trading in 20-cent increments, right? So remember, we got to be able to do our calculations. Okay, how many prints were there? Is it above print personality at that 7 level, or is it below print personality? Way, way, way above, right? Okay, so is it going to be 20 cents on the pullback from underneath 7? So would 680 or technically 675 be a number where it needs to go? Or would it need to continue down further based off our calculations? at least 650. Now, technically, it should be more than 650 based off of the fact that they were way far above. So we could say that it should be over 2 levels for it to end up coming back down. So I'm going to teach you something right now that is going to kind of change your mindset and allow you to actually have the chance to have your game plan really let it work out. And it's being conservative. I talk about this all the time. Now, we know at 7, is there a major market maker there? Based off what we just talked about. Prince way above print personality, of course. We know that someone's sitting at 7. Now, even though we know it needs to go to 650, okay, tops and bottoms technically are not for us. So a way that you could kind of change that mindset of not being as worried to allow the game plan to happen is set your price target to go back to where the market maker is. Because if the stock technically needs to go to 650, and we set our price target at 7 where the market maker is, it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to allow the stock to get to where it needs to be. Because even though we know that this stock needs to go down to 650, what can we almost guarantee is going to happen at 7? Almost guaranteed based off of what we saw. Because we know that we know that there's going to be some type of games that they're going to end up playing here. And you can see, I mean, this one, it wasn't a ton, but still we come to that 7, we go in this consolidation, we end up pulling back up from that 678 print line. Okay, overall, we know where it needs to go, but we can expect that. So just a quick way, especially if you're not allowing your stock to really go where it needs to be, okay, set more conservative game plans for yourself. Because technically, if it needs to go below 7, and we know that's where the huge market maker here is, because they're sparking it off at the psych level to bring it back down. Okay, where's the smoothest part of this trade going to be? Okay, we know it's got to go from 750 to 650. Okay, at a minimum. Okay, but where's the smoothest part of the trade actually going to be? Between what numbers? $7.50 to 7, exactly. And now, why is that? What's the reason behind it? Yeah, and not for nothing, but what's the highest percent trigger that we can have in a stock? What's our highest percent? Our first one. Because the first one that needs to get away from what they're looking to do. And then we know when it gets to 7. So that's one of the biggest ways that you can start to kind of have a lot more faith within your game plan, is knowing it needs to go a lot further, but being conservative on where you're setting your actual price target in the first place. Because guess what? I know if let's say you started trading within the 6 months, your first 6 months, the second it starts to get a little consolidated at 7, what are you going to end up doing? Almost guarantee you're probably either going to take off a large part of your position, or you're going to end up getting out of it. All right, so when you set that conservative game plan, what it's going to actually do is it's going to help have you build confidence in knowing where the stock needs to go. Okay, and once that confidence is built, what's going to happen when the stock gives a little bit of a blip around 7? Well, it's not going to affect you as much. And that's when you're going to be able to get that confidence to actually allow the stock to extend itself and let it to continue to go. But there's no problem with setting a price target back to where the market maker is. All right, so let's now talk about how the plan change according to the prints, and how do we know when to change the initial plan. Okay, so the way that I go about this is that if I see prints, let's say for instance, my price, I'm going in from 750, all right, and my price target is 7. All right, so if my price target is 7, what type of prints could make me get out of my trade? What type of prints could I see that would make me get out of my trade? Over personality prints, okay, to a certain extent. So why wouldn't massive buying actually get me out of the trade? Why wouldn't massive buying get me out of the trade? Because technically that's not really that bad of a thing. I know that my time frame of being in the trade is definitely going to be shorter now, but it technically is going to allow the stock to continue down a little bit off of those big ass prints that come in. Okay, now I know my price target is 750, okay, to 7. That's 50-cent price target. What if I get massive bids at 7.25? Massive bids at 7.25. So that's the thing, okay? Is that good for my overall trade? For overall where the stock needs to go? Is that a good sign for it to go at that towards the 7? So that's yes, overall, but for that moment, it's actually pretty bad. Because if the stock is trading in those 25-cent increments and I get huge bids that come in at 7.25, okay? Is the chances of it coming up back to my entry at 7.50? It is now. So it's still technically showing me that the stock is going to do what I need it to do, but is there any reason for me to give up 25 cents of my trade? No. So in a case like that, I'm going to take off a large portion of the trade. Okay? It's not that the game plan itself isn't being confirmed, it's that my specific trade, that's not good for my trade. If you saw off level after those 7.25, would you stay in? Well, it depends how many off level there were, and it depends what the print personality was. You know, if I got 2 or 3 off level prints that followed afterwards, doesn't mean anything to me. But if I got a real nice off level reaction, okay, then am I still gonna take off? I absolutely am. I'm not gonna take it. I'm gonna take a less percentage off though, because that's still in my game plan now. That still gives me the chance to, at that moment, get to where my price target is. Okay, we got to understand something. Okay, you can just get back into a trade. So there's no reason when I see something like that come in at 7.25, huge bid prints, okay, that I'm going to give up my 25 cents of profit. It's just, why would I do that? Because then guess what? When it comes back up to 7.50, what am I going to look for? What am I going to look for when another trigger? See how that works? So that's the type of situation where, you know, unfortunately, I'm going to have to change my game plan. Because technically, when we follow somebody, are they going to be right? Under my assumption. So market makers have to be right. Always, right? That's the assumption that we have to make as tape readers. Okay, because when we follow large money, that large money needs to be right or they're going to end up losing their job. Okay, but does that mean that the overall move is still, the prints that come in are still good for my trade at that moment? Not always. Because yeah, eventually it's gonna get there, but for my specific trade, it's not always gonna make sense. Now we can look at it in another way. Okay, so let's say I go long at 7. My price target is 7.50. Okay, I get huge ass prints at 7.25. Now, for the overall story, is that a good sign that the stock is going to continue on its way up? It is for the overall. But for my trade at the moment, being in at 7, going long, is that good for my trade? No. So it's not the actual story itself. Okay, we don't like, you know, change of plan. It's not the overall plan that changes. It's the plan for what I'm willing to do and what my trade is happening. Because, you know, guess what? We get huge, you know, let's say we get in at 650, we get huge ass prints at 7. Okay, but they're not that huge. Okay, and it probably needs to pull back 20 cents or so. If it only needs to pull back 20 cents, I'm not worried about that. I might even look for a spot to add to go back up towards that 7. But if I get huge ass prints at 7, okay, and it's going to tell me that now my trade is going to end up losing a large portion of its profit. Is there any reason for us to ever lose a large part of our profit? If it's up 50, if I'm up 50 cents, there's no reason for me to let it go back down 30 cents on me. Because at that point, I mean, you know, you're talking about over, 50% of my trade is now gone because of the prints that came in afterwards. So that's how you manage, okay, whether you're going to change your plan based off the prints you see. Does the overall plan ever change? Does the person I'm originally following still have to make that money? They do. So my overall plan doesn't change, but my intent for the trade can change based off the prints that we see in there. Does it make sense to everybody? Trade management changes, exactly. Okay. Now, what would cause me to completely throw something out the window that I was following? Because that can happen every once in a while. It's rare, but what can make me change my entire overall plan? News, absolutely. News could be one of them. Because guess what? I could have great prints up here at 750, and then if the news comes in and it just starts tanking to the downside, and I see tons of selling coming into it, well, my plan's going to change. This is a greater buying that comes in under with even greater volume. Very true. Absolutely, because I might see somebody that I'm looking to follow, but then someone else comes in that's way bigger. I might look to now make my plan based off that person, because they're showing me that they're more adamant about where the stock is actually going to go. So those are all situations where things can change. But if I'm already in a trade and the trade has shown me that the stock needs to do this, okay, I'm not changing my plan unless something drastic shows up. All right, unless something very drastic shows up, my original game plan is always going to be my original game plan. It's just for my trade management. Unfortunately, sometimes it's got more time to either build, or it just shows, it shows you prints that just aren't great for your trade. Because when do we actually get profit? I could be up $50 in a stock, right? When do I actually make money? Yeah, when you close it, when you actually lock in profit. So there's no reason to let stocks just, go, way past the threshold, because I can always get back into the trade. And Steve, that's a great one too. If the personality doesn't change, okay? If it shows that it doesn't pull back, for instance, like fuel cell. When I see huge buying, okay, I'm going to be looking for it to do what first? Yeah, pull back. Did anything in fuel cell tell us that? Yeah, so my game plan's definitely going to change based off what I'm seeing. I know eventually it's going to come down to, a reality check, but at that moment, there's nothing that I have to do. This is one of the easiest trades that we've seen. It was basically set it and forget it. It just kept getting buying at every level. And when I say every level, I don't mean every major level. I mean every number was just giving huge buying. So it was tons of off level. It was amazing. And you could just see the volume here. Okay, and another thing too is that the volume just stayed consistent all the way till pretty much, until this moved towards the downside, and that's when we start to get lower. But almost the entire morning, the volume was very consistent. So when volume's just consistent like that, and it's just continuing to move up, continuing to see the same thing happen over and over again with that buying, yeah, my plan's going to change a bit. Like I said, I'm still eventually going to look for that entire move. But if you think about it, what number am I going to look for the entire reality check to be from? 750. I'm going to look for a cycle level. Isn't it magical? Hits the cycle level, boom, beautiful trade. See how this works? Make sense, everyone? Okay, great question, Trevor. Rich, in the chat on Monday, Doug made a comment that many of us seem to rely on the vets to tell us whether the prints are what they showed on the tape. Can you talk a little bit about how seeing orders get executed, what to look for, make note of, or what to ignore? All right, so when you see a stock coming up, okay, where do we look for to see if what the order was executed on? What do we look for? We look at our matrix. Okay, technically right here, I mean, I don't use all the exchanges, as you guys know, but technically and theoretically right now would be, 10,000 shares would have to be hit at 662. okay? And those 10,000 shares would then make the stock move ascend. So I know right now that if I see 62 right now, what is it technically going to be? If I see 662 pop up on my screen right now, what's it going to be? In time and sales. It's going to be ask. I know that. All right. So if I'm watching a stock, it's really that simple. If I'm watching a stock, okay, I know where the order is right this second. Okay. So I know exactly what I like. If that number pops up, for instance, if we saw 660 and it came in red, okay, is that possible? Does that make sense that it was if it comes up in red? Oh, because it's on the ask side. Right? What if I saw 662 pop up right now? What would my assumption be? 662 up here. What would my assumption be now? Gold, because it's above the actual price where the ask is. So if I saw 62 pop up in gold, makes sense for it to be above the ask. See how that works? It's really just watching where the order actually is. Okay, and when we know where the actual order itself is, we know what it would make sense as the stock is being executed. Now, there's one thing that goes into this as well. Can I look at my bigger time in sales for this to make sense? I cannot. Why not? Yeah, it's not enough info. Okay, everything that I know when the orders are getting executed and what colors that I got to be looking on here, because this one says we have 13,700. No, excuse me, not 900, but okay, 9,700, 10,000. I have to understand something that I'm looking over here, okay, and that's going to make sense for the color. Okay, because I got to see everything that's being executed. 10,000 shares might be executed in all hundreds. You never know. Okay, that's why I use the level 2, because, for instance, I know that someone could execute 1,700 shares here, 2,000 shares here. Do I ever use the color of my volume? In what sense? You mean on my chart? So the problem with that is that this color bar, okay, these color bars, basically, it's just showing that if the bar closes lower than, like the minute ends and it's lower than what it started at, what it opened at, it's going to show up as orange. Okay, and if I have the blue, if the bar closes higher than what it opened at, it's going to show up in blue. So the problem with that is this bar right here, even though it closed lower, could this bar have been going up, even though it's in orange, and executed on the ask, and then it ended up closing lower? Is that a possibility? Yeah, exactly. This bar could have went up first, hit ask, and then it just ended up closing lower than what it opened at. And then in that case, unfortunately, it shows an orange, so it would look like there would be bids, but technically they could be asked. Now, most of the time, if you see a bar, bar going down and then it executes, more than likely it's going to be bid, but that's just a situation. So you can't rely on that 100%, because it's very possible that it could still execute one way, but close at the lower side. What about the up and down ticks on volume? Can we use that info at all? I mean, I guess you can, but I mean, it's not really, like, for instance, okay, if let's say it shows above the ask, okay, above the ask prints, and then the next bar, okay, is for the next execution are ask prints. Is that going to show up as an uptick or a downtick? No, it's going to show as a downtick, because the stock it's the print up above it, okay, technically was above, and then it hit ask, so it's actually above the ask and ask, which technically the way you would look at it would be upticks because you're looking for that, but it would show up as a downtick because the ask was lower than the above the ask. See what I mean? I just, once again, I like the colors and stuff like that. I mean, you could get a little, idea, but I really use the tops right here. Okay, the gray is the gray that you see here is the upticks and the downticks just put together. Yeah, no, good questions. Yeah, makes sense. Beautiful. Okay. Hey, Rich, in pre-market, fuel cells showed us nice buying, but no controlling prints, and the stock opened and moved to 650 on really clear buying. But is there an entry here, an acceptable or correct trade, and why? I personally do not think so, despite the very clear buying. Also at 650, we got ask and no pullback, and although I was aware that the personality shows small pullbacks, this wasn't enough in my opinion. Then we got a trigger on low volume, which seemed pretty unconvincing, but seeing that it worked out, was this an acceptable trade and why so? I'm just having a hard time knowing whether I read into something on these variables too much or was it simply an exception? Okay, so this morning when we saw the stock actually going up in fuel cell, all right, it was a ton of, okay, so the beginning trade, it was actually a ton of buying that came in off levels. Okay, at the 30, the 27, I mean, it was just a huge amount. So it really, that much buying and that much off level really showed us that this stock was going to start to make its move almost immediately. Okay, but yeah, I mean, there was nothing but buying. It was just, it was absolutely phenomenal. So the real first trade would have been right here. Okay, because we came up, we had that huge buying at 650. Okay, and then we pulled back 10 cents. Why would 10 cents be okay? Why would 10 cent be okay? Yeah, the amount of shares that, okay, the amount of volume that was actually being traded in it, how long does it actually take them to be able to buy or build, excuse me? How long does it actually take to build on a stock like this? Can they do it quickly or does it take a long time? Very quick. I mean, look at the volume. The volume for the entire morning was, on average, if you look over here, just at like the highs after 10, we're talking about like 1.5 million, even the average right here, right? Give or take about 1.2 million. So there was just too much volume. Okay. And then the executions, if you remember, what was the print personality? Wasn't there a trigger in the second minute? Yeah, off to 625 prints. You could have taken that as well. I mean, technically you could have taken it right here. That's where I traded it. Right over that print line. Overall print personnel is maybe 10. I think 10 would even be light, to be honest with you. I mean, this morning when we saw it, I mean, that it was like, 15. It got to a point that I really even care about print personnel anymore. It was just so high that we just needed to see a ton of prints. Because I'm not going to sit there, especially at the beginning of the open, and start counting the prints to get an idea. It was just extremely high. So anything that I saw that was just a ton of buying, that's what stood out to me. Okay, a stock like this that trades that high of a print personality, sometimes it's a lot harder to read just because there's so much going on within it. So you really just got to take what you're seeing. And remember, a stock like this that has that high of a print personality and it's got this much volume. Okay, I want to see buying in it. If I'm looking to take a trade, that's going to show me it can move, $1 to make 50 cents. And that's exactly what we got here. It was just absolutely absurd. And it was not only that, it was just all buying. All buying. So absolutely right, Tracy, if you would have used 625 from this morning, because not only did it have 625, but it leaked over into that 630. So if you would have taken this second bar that pushed it up, that would be fine. You had your pullback here after the 650 prints. That would have been fine. You could have actually taken it up. Oh, no, you couldn't have taken it here. Actually, did it? Yeah, it did 7. So the problem there is that you really couldn't have taken, no, so the bids and then the ask came right here, I believe, just trying to remember. And this was actually aspirin. So technically you could have taken it here as well. But knowing that once it did get those bids and then followed by the aspirins, okay, you would have had to say, I'm not going to be in this trade for a lot longer because of the fact that technically that pattern shows us a quick move to the upside and then a move down. So there was a bunch of acceptable trades coming into this. Now we also got to look at something. What's our personality? Do we get large pullbacks? Small pullbacks? Okay, what's another part of its personality that we talked about in class? What was the stock doing? Where was it building? Building on the way up. So essentially, again, you could have taken a little bit of a pullback, and after it goes like right here, okay, it's a little bit of a consolidation. After a pullback, trigger above the consolidation, like we talked about. Okay, it really didn't consolidate much because it was just beautifully moving up. But the bars are real overlapping. They were building tons as the stock was moving. It was very controlled. Beautiful trade. And then again, we know that eventually it's going to have to come back to reality. Where do we look for a stock to come back to reality? I'm going to drill this into you guys' head. Where do we look for a stock to come back to personality? It's the best spots. Psych levels, and it just did exactly that. Little push over that 750, and then bam. Now we could have also been ready for what? Does it need to push over 750? No, we could have been ready too for to push into 750, not hit, and then take the trigger from there. Okay. Just understanding what the actual personality of the stock itself was. Make sense? Okay, cool. Moving along, this is our last question, I believe. Okay, I know this is a basic question, but do you have any tips on when to add to your trades? This is something I normally don't do and would like to get better. When do you scale out and add back, holding and adding? So that's really going to depend on each different stock. All right. So for instance, okay, let's say we kind of this. I mean, this is a great stock to be able to add back into. But let's say we got in over this 725. Okay, and we have the amount of buying that we saw. What would our price target have been if we took our trade over that 25? So there's a few different type of personalities that I look for in a stock that I want to add to. What would our price target have been if we took that trade over 625? $6.50, right? Stock's trading in 25-cent increments. Technically, it should go higher than 6.50. Okay, but at the end of the day, we're going to be conservative, like we said. 6.50 is going to give us that new info. Okay, so then we come into 6.50. Okay, from 6.50, what happened? Well, okay, at this point, we know that the stock's personality does not show large pullbacks. Okay, you can even see from our going into the pre-market, and at this point we know very controlled trade. It's building on the way up. Typically, a stock that's building on the way up is the ones that aren't going to give big pullbacks. Okay, they're going to happen all at once because they're technically already building. So there's no reason to bring it back down a far amount because they're literally able to build as the stock is continuing. Okay, so then we come to 650 and we get a perfect trade that comes into that stock, like we did. Okay, so one of the characteristics that I always look for is a stock that if I'm long a stock, okay, I don't want it to give big pullbacks in order to add, because then if I get at 650, I get huge ask prints. What am I going to end up having to do? We just talked about it. I'm into 625. I get huge ask prints at 650. Stock gives like 25 cent or large pullbacks. What am I going to? I'm going to have to get out most of my position now. And then I'm going to have to take the trade all the way back down here. I'm not going to add, well, I mean, technically I would, it would be adding because I'm going to be out by the time it gets all the way back to my entry. I'm not going to just give up profit to give up profit. So I'm going to have to retake that trade. But when the characteristic of a stock shows that it gives minimal pullbacks and you see a perfect trade come in where it's ask prints at 650, what number trade am I going to look for there? Let's say I'm not even in the stock yet. What kind of trade am I going to take there? Or look for there and then take? So it doesn't give large pullbacks. Doesn't give large pullbacks. I'm going to have to look for a number 4 trade. So if I'm already in this trade, and then I know it does, and I see number 4 trade come there, isn't that a great spot to add? Isn't that a perfect spot to add? So like I said, especially when you're starting off in the beginning of starting to add to your trades, that's one of the best characteristics you have is a stock that doesn't give large pullbacks. Okay. Or if a stock does give large pullbacks, we can use that too. And I'm just going to use Crocs, for instance, because Crocs is, so let's look at our print personality and do some calculations on how the stock moves. Now, does it give large pullbacks? Well, it should, because it's $21. It's moved $21.16 today. So even kind of a normal pullback is still, like, for instance, you can see right here, 158. It's comes all the way down. That's $5 move. So it's, of course, it's always going to be relative. Okay, so in a stock like this, let's say it gives large pullbacks, and I come in, okay, and let's say I get in underneath 158 right here. It's pushing into 158, doesn't hit. I get my trigger back down. Okay, if I start to come down and I start to see off-level selling prints that are coming in this, what are the off-level selling prints telling me? Start seeing a bunch of off-level selling prints. What is that telling me? Yeah, it's got more room. So if I pull up from that, okay, there's times where I'll add, because technically it doesn't have to pull up a lot on off-level. It's just telling me that I have more room within my trade. So at that point, I might add some to my position once it pulls back up, because it's got to come back down quick. Now, I'm always going to add on a what? In order to add, I need a what? Trigger. Okay, we don't just add into a stock to add into a stock. You still need a trigger. Okay, because essentially what it's telling us is there's another trade within the trade that we already took. And based off the percentage of that trade, that's how much I'm going to add. Let's just make up a number. We're trading 1,000 shares. Okay, if it's an 80% trade, I might add another 800 shares. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a very high percentage trade that's happening again within there. Okay, I'm going to trade. It's being in a trade, seeing another high percentage trade and taking that trade. Okay, typically you're never going to, it's not always, but what's your highest percent trigger always going to be? The first one. So typically when you add, you're not going to be adding more than what you originally started with. So again, you're trading 1,000 shares. You're probably not going to add, once the stock is already doing what you expected, you're not going to add 2,000. You're typically going to add less than what your original game plan was, because you're never, the first trigger is the highest percentage of getting far away as quickly as possible. Because as the stock starts to move down, like in this case, okay, we get our trigger, but once the stock typically has a large movement to make, what happens a lot of the time during that large movement? And I'm going to go back to fuel cell just to give you that an example. So what typically happens? Yeah, you're going to see consolidation in it. So the worst thing that can happen is you add into your trade, and then all of a sudden now it's sitting in consolidation, even though you know where it needs to go. Because are you going to be able to get as far away as quickly as possible from your second entry? No. So you really want to make sure that it's a trade that has the ability to continue volume. Because you know what? If I got in right now, I got in underneath this 750 level. Okay, and right now this stock is just trickling down like this. Do I care that volume's slowing down? Or that volume's real slow right now? Does it really matter to me? As long as I have the prints that tell me it needs to continue to go down. Doesn't really matter, because guess what? I'm in from all the way up here. So I'm already away as far away as quickly as possible from there. I have plenty of room. I can just let it kind of do that float around thing. Now, if I took this trade underneath 650, do I care that this is happening right now? Big time. I can't have that happen. I need because what happens when a stock has low volume and sits in consolidation? Well, it's very easy for a big bar to come up, and then I'm not going to be able to control my loss, and or even just maybe have a loss for no reason. So just be careful of that. That the volume, so that's why we talk about stocks that have sporadic volume. Okay, this is a perfect example in BBIG because at certain times, you see how the volume gets real high and it looks like it would be a beautiful trade. But what's the problem here? Am I going to get into BBIG? Does volume stay? No. So because I can see that when I might know that there's beautiful prints up at the 11 and it looks like, that trigger that comes in. But the problem is that once the volume starts to die off, we go into this crap. So now I'm in this trade and this consolidation where volume's dying off. And then guess what happens when someone comes in with a big bar? Whoop, now I'm all the way down here. You see what I mean? So that's another key to adding to, if you're going to be adding to your stock is make sure that volume is staying consistent. Last thing you want to do is because you don't want to have a great trade, add to it, and then get stuck in this crap and then lose on the trade that you took and make that great trade turn into, either a loser or just take a lot of your profit away from you because your original trade was, already making you money. See what I mean? So you just don't want to, you want to make sure that you don't get caught into that. Okay. Now, another thing that you want to think about is the amount of prints you get. If prints are at print personality, do you think I'm ever going to be looking to add? Okay. Do you think not that I'm not ever, but okay, am I really going to want to add? Now, so the thing about is that let's say my price target is from here at 850 to 9. I technically, if I'm going to be looking to add, I want those prints to really show me that this stock could go to 950. Because if these prints down here show me that this trade could go to 950, and I see a nice trade at print personality at 9, now my percent chance of taking this and it working out to get to that 950, okay, is even higher for it to move past that 950. Okay, because the prints down here at 850 already told me it has the ability to get to that 950. Even if no other buying came in, this person said stock's going to 950. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? I want the prints that I'm actually taking, the original prints I'm following, to show me a lot of range. If a stock has a 50-cent range, am I going to add on 25 cents? Once I'm up 25 cents, I see another trade for 25 cents. Am I going to add to that? No, because unfortunately, it doesn't give me the opportunity to get my trade as far away as quickly as possible for my entry. All right, so that's another big thing that you want to look at is the original prints you're following. Okay, yeah, there's a print line right here at 929. Okay, and if I look at the print personality here, okay, it's give or take, what, about 4? Okay, for the most part. Okay, you get some bigger prints, but for the most part, it's about 4. Okay, if I have right now, okay, the print line sitting here at 929. If I get 21 prints, no, it's 21, but I get 21 prints. Okay, is it able to break this print line even though that print line's there? Did the person here at 850 tell me that this print line is going to be broken? $21 ask prints. Okay. Print personality is, we're talking about 4. Yeah. So this person down here already told me that I could go way past here. So if I see another trade at 9 that comes in, I'll add to it, knowing that at this print line, more than likely I'm going to see games and there's probably going to be congestion. But what's the worst case? I would like the print line to be a little bit further. And I mean, this stock you wouldn't trade with, with someone else's money. But you understand what I mean? So the original prints I'm following, I really want them to show me that the stock has the ability to go a longer way without even needing anything else coming in. So when that other thing does come in, I still have room for my original prints. Adding is going to give me a higher percentage chance of that trade working out and being able to continue to move and then get as far away as quickly as possible from my entry. Make sense? All right, any questions? What was our last question? We're all good to go? All right, perfect. I will talk to everyone in the chat and happy trading.